Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another Osoroshii Saturday. Today we deal with all sorts of weird things and we get a chance to take a step outside of my house and actually walk around Japan. I thought a change of scenery would be nice as our stories are changing a little bit. We've got today a Korean creepypasta, something a little bit different as I like to pull horror from all around Asia, and even one of our games today is a Korean horror survival game. That being said, I hope you're ready for everything from body horror to ghostly scares here on Osoroshii Saturday. What's up everybody, Unrested on the move today, going through a little bit of back alleys here in the middle of Japan and winding my way into a kind of abandoned little park back here that not many people come to anymore. And I'm going back there to show you an example of the ditch, or I guess it's kind of like an open sewer type area that is in today's story. And today's story is actually written down in a book, and I'm literally rehashing it as best as I can from memory about this girl's experience from Korea. And the story was literally just called The Garden. And it was about a strange little garden that a friend of hers found in a open sewer in Korea and what happened. Now I'm going to go ahead and just take a look over here with you and show you a little bit about what it looks like. Throw it back here so you can see behind me. There you go, you can kind of see it's pretty nasty looking, right? It's not the nicest looking thing, kind of like a mixture between a creek and an open sewer. It's kind of nasty. Yeah, there's some parts of Japan that are a little bit gross. That being said, today's story is a little bit gross, and you know, it's up to you whether or not you want to believe how gross this story gets, so let's just sit down for a bit and have a tale. So our story is in Korea, like I said, and it concerns an English teacher. So it was a story kind of dear to my heart because obviously I started out as an English teacher here in Japan. Korea is a lot like Japan in the sense of the technology is about the same. There's a certain code of ethics and politeness and the way you talk to people and a level of customer service. So it's got a lot in common with Japan. It's not entirely different. Nonetheless, the two countries do seem to quarrel quite a bit. Anyway, that being said, this girl headed over there to teach English just like you would in Japan. Same sort of situation where you grab the job online, usually interview via Skype or possibly somewhere within your own country. This girl came from Australia to teach in Korea. And she headed over there and had fallen in love with this biker girl that she had met while going on a tour of a certain part of Korea. And she said this biker girl was really punk rock and really into the drug scene in Korea, which is pretty rare. Drugs in Korea are just as rare as they are in Japan, and you probably would get even more trouble in Korea than you would in Japan if you were caught dealing, using, or abusing drugs in any manner. So let's just say this girl was on the edge. She was on the fringes of society, mostly due to her drug use. That being said, the two got into a relationship and of course would hang out and do some drugs together, smoke up, all different types of things. This girl wasn't into any specific drug, she was just into getting her hands on anything she could. And one day one of the drugs that she brought home was this weird brown mushroom that her Australian friend said tasted really nasty, and she never really got that high from it. She started to see like little wisps of gold in her vision, she said, but for the most part she didn't get high from it. She just threw up a lot and it got out of her system pretty quick because she just couldn't stop vomiting. But her Korean friend, the biker girl, the punk rock girl, just downed a huge handful of it, ate a bunch right away, and she said she was tripping out hard, and they were in this kind of park area where the girl started talking about seeing all different types of golden strands, kind of like the other girl had seen, but like they were for her huge and floating down from the sky. And she said she could touch them and feel them, and they were connecting with her body. And she just figured, whatever, she's on a really bad trip. And then she just started taking off running towards all these golden strands that she could see, and her friend couldn't find her until the next morning when she finally called her apartment and found out she had fallen asleep there after wandering home. So she went over to her apartment and was like, are you okay? What happened last night? You kind of freaked out and just ran off into the darkness, talking about all these gold strands. And she said, oh, well, the gold strands are still with me. She's like, what are you talking about? And she showed her some wounds. There was like wounds underneath her chin right here, and there was a wound in her hand. She said, you see, I can still feel them inside of me, and I've been picking them out because I don't want them to continue to grow on me too fast. She's like, what are you talking about? She's totally freaked out by this. She's like, all right, you know what? I'm going to try and call her parents. So she's like, look, go take a shower. You're totally disgusting from yesterday. You're still smelling bad from, the vomit and all the different things you ran through as you took off into the darkness. So while she did that, she grabbed her cell phone and she dialed up what she saw listed as home in Korean, figuring this is probably the only connection she had to her parents. And when she tried to get her dad on the phone, she said, your daughter's sick. And he was really cold. He said, oh, she's sick? Well, then I hope she dies. And he hung up. And she's like, whoa, what the hell? Like, what kind of connection do they have with their family? Like, has something really gone wrong? So she didn't tell her Korean friend about it. And they decided to just go ahead and hang out again and just smoke a joint and then pass out on their bed together, cuddling. And when she woke up, her friend was gone again, and she thought about a couple areas that she could go to. She'd either went to a dealer's. She didn't really have any other friends than her, the Australian girl, and she didn't ever hang out with her roommates, so she figured where else could she have gone but those gardens that she was talking about. So she remembered the name of the garden that she had said where she had found those mushrooms, and she started to asking around town, and people were like, well, that's not really a garden, that's more of like a ditch. And then as she started to translate it more, she realized they weren't saying ditch, they're like, that's not really a garden, that's more of a sewer. And so she made her way to this sewer. It was pretty much the plant where everything gets filtrated and put through different types of distilling and stuff like that. And she got in there and she was just like, what the hell is this? Like, what did she mean by a garden? And then she noticed one of the sewer tops, like the circular containers that close up the sewer, the lid had some of those brown mushrooms growing around the side. So she was like, really? Here's where she picked it from? And she kind of lifted off the lid, and when she did, she saw there was actually somebody down there with a light on, and it looked to be possibly a sewer worker. And he was dressed up in kind of like bright clothes with kind of those reflective bands on it and stuff like that, and a yellow helmet and stuff. And she's like, oh, okay, so somebody's working down here and tending some sort of weird growth, and this must be where she picked it from. So I'm gonna try and talk to this guy and find out what the hell that stuff was. Maybe this guy knows. So she climbed down, and right away this guy started yelling at her like, hey, you're not supposed to be in here. Foreigners are not supposed to just suddenly, walk into areas that are marked off, or sewer systems of, the Korean sewer system. And he started to get closer to her. She noticed that even though he was wearing some sort of maintenance clothing, that they were really old and torn and ripped up, and that around his hands and his face he had some of the same sores, and there was actually like long golden hairs coming out of them, like the gold hairs that she had seen before, or the gold hairs that her friend had kept talking about and picking out of her face and her hands. And she thought maybe that was just some sort of chemical reaction from the drug. She was freaking out and picking at her skin like a meth addict would. But she saw these gold strands on him, and he seemed totally crazed and started to run at her pretty fast, and she got freaked out by this, was ready to climb back out. And as she did, he lunged forward and grabbed a hold of her, and his helmet had fallen off and everything. And when that happened, she saw that this part of his head here had all those same types of sores with the gold hairs, and at the very back was like a crack in his skin, and a big like brown glob of like fungus type / mushroom stuff was growing out of it. So she got super freaked out, kicked him off, he fell backwards, and she started running through the sewer system to try and find another way to escape, since she had already closed the lid on the top of the area she had gone through. And while she was going through there, she said she saw all kinds of crazy shit, like these giant mushroom groupings and twines of interconnecting tendrils of all the different brown fungus and mushroom that her friend had given to her to try out earlier. And she said within these clumps, she said she could swear she saw body parts, like body parts mixed into them, like a head sticking out of one. But she said probably it was just like the hallucinogenic effect of the mushrooms or something like that causing her to feel like this. And she passed it off as just her kind of still tripping from yesterday's drugs. And finally, when she got to the end of this whole little area covered in these brown fungus slash mushrooms, that's when she ran into her friend who was picking more of them. Her friend was down there and had been picking more of these hallucinogenic mushrooms, and when she turned around and saw that it was her Australian friend, she was really happy to see her, but she said, "Oh, why did you come down here?" She's like, "I was looking for you. I was really worried. You know, you were picking at your sores and then you ran off, and then I saw this weird guy down here. I thought maybe he attacked you and there was some kind of problem." She said, No, I'm just down here to do more of this." And she had a huge handful that she was about to eat of the brown mushroom and fungus. She said, "Don't eat that. Like, I've seen horrible things happening to people in here. Like, this guy's got these golden hairs growing out of him, and there's like a mushroom growing out of his head and stuff from eating those." And she said, "Yeah, but that's okay because I want to join these people down there eating this stuff because I want to join this family of the mushroom eaters." And of course, this is just a poor translation. I'm just doing the best I can with the translation. I don't speak Korean, and this was kind of translated into like gibberish type English, so I'm doing my best I can. But she said, why would you want to join these people down here for this?" And she said, "Well, I don't have a family anymore. You know, my dad has totally washed his hands of me after I started doing drugs, and the only family that seems to really care for me for the first time I found is this family of mushroom eaters down here." And with that, she ate another big handful of those mushrooms and passed out. And as she passed out, the Australian girl said she could start to already see these golden hairs start to grow off of her face and stuff, and she just ran out of there as she watched this fungus start to eat her body. And she just left screaming from the sewer, and eventually ended up back in Australia because that sent her home. She had had too bad of a trip, too bad of a rush on drugs, and her experience had gone awry due to her own use of unknown hallucinogenics. And that being said, she doesn't really know if what she had seen was real or just kind of a fever dream of sorts, a hallucinogenic sort of dream world brought on by the drugs, but it's a pretty horrific story nonetheless. I don't know if I'd call this a scary story, but it's a pretty strange one. It was one told to me by a Japanese friend who had gone to college near Tokyo, and it's just a story I call "Are You My Mom?" And I'll just go ahead and read what we kind of worked on together to translate it into English, and you can make your own choice on whether or not this is a creepy story. This might get long, but this is one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had. I was waiting at a stoplight on my way to class when a man standing next to me suddenly started talking. "Are you my mom?" he said. I looked at him, and his eyes bored into mine. I should tell you at this time I was only 20 years old. I was a university student and had never been pregnant nor given birth. Regardless of all that, the man was clearly more than 30 years old, meaning that it would be impossible for me to be his mother. You have the wrong person. I'm sorry." I started fidgeting, glancing back and forth at the light to see if it had changed. The man seemed shocked at my answer, as if he were asking me why I would lie about something like that. His reaction put me on edge, and as soon as the light turned green, I hurried across the street and ran away. It might be rude of me to say this, but I think the man may have had some mental problems. His eyes darted around sharply, and he wore an odd-looking yellow pouch over his shoulder that hung down over a shabby t-shirt. This was only the first time I encountered him. Unknown to me, over the next several years, I would encounter him many more times. Every day after that, the man would wait for me at the exact same spot, and every time I passed by him, he would ask the same question. "Are you my mom?" "No," I decided to give him a one-word answer. He made me feel uneasy, but it wasn't bad enough to go to the cops. But one day, he just started showing up at my university. I lost it. I started screaming at him. I don't want to see you again. I think you're disgusting. I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along those lines. He didn't show up after that. I graduated from university in Tokyo and went back to my hometown to work. 1 year later, I got a call from a friend in college. Hey, remember that stalker you had? Well, he showed up here near the school the other day, so he sees me and asks, "Where's my mom?" It totally freaked me out and I ran away. That was the gist of the conversation. Honestly, I'd almost forgotten about him. While my memories of him were certainly creepy, I thought that I would be safe since I was several miles away from Tokyo. I started again to forget about the man and continued living a normal life. The next year, my Mother's Day came, and I opened the door to go outside, only to find a bouquet of withered carnations sitting on my doorstep. I immediately knew it was the man near my university, and I called my dad to see what I should do. I also contacted the police, but they didn't really do anything to help me. Things calmed down yet again for a few months. Winter came and the snow was piling up outside. One day I was walking around downtown when a car lost traction, slid into another, which then in turn crashed into like a resembling line of dominoes falling over. And it was one car hit another and another and another, and I was taken off guard when one suddenly slid towards me, hitting me, knocking me unconscious. The next thing I knew, I was lying between the car, a felled tree, and a large pile of snow. Everything in my body hurt, and I couldn't move a muscle. I cried out, but the entire area was loud with people shouting and crying. Nobody noticed my voice amidst the chaos. I looked around and noticed one of the cars next to me was on fire. I screamed even louder, but I was still alone. I began to cry, thinking my time was definitely up. Suddenly, I heard a voice coming closer to me. "Mom? Mom?" It was the man from Tokyo. "Here, I'm over here," I screamed. Without thinking, "Help me, I'm right here, please help me." He appeared next to me, covered in blood. Was he involved in the accident too? The man pushed some snow out of the way and pulled me up within the pile of white I had been trapped in. Despite my fear of him, I looked at him, really looked at him. His injuries looked quite serious to me. His eyes had tears in them, and his mouth was contorted in a painful grimace, but he didn't seem to notice. He was looking at me. "Are you my mom?" He seemed almost desperate, and I wasn't sure how to answer. Yeah, I am. I'm your mom." I nodded as tears began to roll down my cheeks. I closed my eyes to wipe the tears away from mine. When I looked up again, the man was gone. In less than a moment, he had vanished. And that's that. It's been a few years since then, and that's the last time I saw him. I don't know who or what he was, but I'm hesitant to call him a ghost. Sometimes, when it snows outside, I remember him. My son, whose name I never knew. Now, this is kind of a strange tale. You may wonder what exactly this girl was dealing with, and theories between her, I, and a few other friends were the fact that this may have been an actual ghost, not an actual real person or a creepy type stalker. In the end, it turns out this may have been an actual ghost that was the son of her from a past life, because you got to remember, most of Japan believes in reincarnation. They believe they've lived multiple lives. That's the way Buddhism and even Shintoism works, that there's reincarnation. And so she believes this ghost type 30-year-old man to be the ghost of one of her past lives when she was an older woman who had a child of that age who had possibly died, and it had come back to save her in a new life. Very strange nonetheless. Next up, come along, as always, we check out Ghosts on Film. for a movie today and horror on film. We're going to talk about a movie that kind of strays away from what we're used to talking about with the psychological scares and psychological horror of most Japanese horror films. This one's going to get into the splatterpunk genre. That means tons of gore, guts, and all kinds of intestines spilling out onto the screen. And the movie I'm talking about is Robo-Geisha, made by the director who also made a great movie called Tokyo Gore Police. If you like splatter, guts, gore, and all sorts of blood splattered across your screen with a pretty decent story that's got some funny but eye-popping effects, you should check this out. Robo-Geisha is a crazy story with an absolutely absurd tale, yet endearing nonetheless. You're gonna love the characters, you're gonna root for them, you're gonna be blown away by what the final fight is like in this movie because it is just insane. Things get taken to a level that you never imagined them getting to. And the final showdown between the different Robo-Geishas is just out of this world. Definitely a movie to check out if you're into the splatterpunk genre or any sort of gore type films like that. Robo-Geisha, and if you like that one, also make sure you check out Tokyo Gore Police too. As for horror games this week, we're sticking with our Korean theme since we had a Korean story this time. I'm going to stick with a Korean horror game, one called A Labyrinth Called School. This is such a subtle game. It starts out so subtle and so innocent seeming, and then grows darker and darker. If you've ever wanted to see what a Korean high school or Japanese high school looks like, they're not really too different. And this allows you to take on the life of a Korean high school student who just starts out a little bit exploring the school and then get wound deeper and deeper into a horrific story. It takes twists that you would never imagine and gets darker and darker. This game was so scary. The legend of this game is the fact that it was so very scary. The people who made the game actually were asked by the people who played it to edit it a bit because it was actually so scary people had to stop playing it at some points. Now, of course, we're playing the edited version. It doesn't feel as scary as that now, but apparently before it was edited by the creators, it was apparently so horrific that people were literally having like heart problems and stuff playing it. It is a free game. You can go find it online and download it totally for free. Go check it out. A great Korean horror game. A Labyrinth Called School.
Osoroshii Saturday.